Hello, BookTube. Well, it's the end of February. March is right around the corner, and that means that on BookTube you're going to see a slew of March TBR videos. And I want to join in the fun. I always do want to do that, but TBR in the strictly traditional sense for me for the month of March wouldn't be very practical to do in a video. I plan on reading well over 100 books in the month of March, and I can't very well sit here and show you 100 books. And also, just as importantly, I don't know what a lot of them will be. The number I'm pretty sure will be just because I know how much I read in a 24-hour period, but the actual books, there's no way for me to know. So instead of doing a TBR, what I like to do on this channel is a TBR-BY, to be read by you, where I make 10 suggestions of books that are coming out in the following month that I can recommend to you, and if they interest you as a category or type of book or a subject matter, you can know at least if you see them in the bookstore that they interested me as well, and that I do recommend them. So I want to start off. I've got them on the yoga book here, which is going to involve a tiny amount of fussing around with them to make sure you can see them clearly. So there'll be a few companionable pauses. But the first one is by Justin Weiss or Vaisse. It's a biography. We'll start with serious biographies. The only one on the list. It's a new biography of Zbigniew Brzezinski. The subtitle is America's Grand Strategist. He was a extremely influential advisor to President Johnson, and then he was part of President Carter's government, building a worldview and a method of engagement with the world that very much still has his signature on it, and that if you didn't know, if you saw some policy from the time, you'd be able to tell whether or not Brzezinski had any hand in it. A fascinating figure, and I've been waiting. I'm waiting actually for a large number of these particular figures from this particular 25-30 year period to start getting serious biographies, and this is his, and it was very good. I disagreed with it in a lot of places, but boy oh boy do I recommend it, especially if you lived through the Carter administration and you want to know more about it. This will actually tell you a lot more about it. And then we're going to move on. We'll move on to two works of history, and the first one is grim on the surface, but very enjoyable. It's a very enjoyable book. It's by Daniel Kalder, and it's called The Infernal Library. And it is I don't know where he found the intestinal fortitude to do it, but he does a searching literary study of the various kinds of literature created by the worst dictators in human history. Their books. He reads their books, their poetry, their political tracts, their novels, and talks about them and what they mean, and maybe how the times are reflected in them, or how they presage the times that come. I thought it was wonderful. Just wonderful. I would never have thought that you could get a whole book out of the subject, much less a fascinating book. But it really is. If you see it in your bookstore and you're interested in that sort of thing, I don't actually know what sort of thing that would be, but it's extremely entertaining. Calder does a wonderful job with it. The next one is also history. It's more of a must-read. Honestly, if I had my way, I would probably urge every single reader in the country of America to read this book. It's The Woman's Hour by Elaine Weiss. Oh God. Well, okay. Well, of course, it has my highest recommendation, so it also has a revolt. That's what it looks like. A very simple, iconic white cover of a poster, and it's a full-blown, really personality-driven, full of reconstituted dialogue, full of drama, history of the very last months in the effort to ratify the 19th Amendment and give women the right to vote. And the author does a fantastic job of touching on all the various aspects of that fight, taking it from just a simple question of do women have the right to vote or not, to all the permutations of it in society, for questions of racism, because of course you'd be giving the vote to you know, a large number of black women. There were plenty of white men who didn't like that idea. Plenty of black men who didn't like that idea. Plenty of women who didn't like the idea of the suffragette movement. It's amazing. It's an amazing. I've read many books on the subject of you know, the struggle for women to have the right to vote in America, but this is by far the best one. It's a tremendous reading experience. And then I want to move on to 2 kids' books. The first one is by Matt Phelan, and it is just an instant classic. It's Pignic. It's a bunch of pigs who go on a picnic. The artwork is utterly delightful, and the question is the same as is faced by any picnicker anywhere, which is, what will or will not ruin the outing? Will a bad storm suddenly coming out of nowhere break things? Will clashing tempers? It's a delight to read to children. And so is the next one, even more so, because the next one is told in kind of a bouncy sing-song rhyme. It's by Eve Bunting, and it's illustrated by Will Hillenbrand, and it's called I'm a Duck. And it's just a poetic exploration of what it is to be a duck. And again, if you do it with the right animation and perhaps the right sound effects, it will be a hit with your very small reading audience. Then next one is a reprint. It's the Great Library of America reprint series. They're a reprint series here in America that reprints American classics on acid-free paper with a built-in bookmark and sewn binding, and they're clearly meant to last a lifetime. The pages will not stiffen, they will not yellow, nothing will become brittle. And we've mentioned on this channel before, the editors of Library of America are in some ways restricted by copyright and by very active copyright protecting literary estates, but they still manage to do a great job. Their line has only grown since its inception and is full of wonderful stuff. And this latest one I've actually been waiting for. It's Rachel Carson. This is Silent Spring and Other Environmental Writings. Rachel Carson, her Silent Spring sold a boatload of copies and ignited a large chunk of what we would consider now to be the environmental movement, and is prescient in a lot of disturbing ways. I remember when I first read it, I thought, you're being a little gloomy here. I just spent the summer hiking through the American Northeast, and you're being a little gloomy here. But no, no. Silent Spring is just as powerful now. In fact, more so than it ever was. Now that we currently live in an age where you can look at the natural world, and instead of seeing it imperiled, you can see easily, without much in the way of mental extrapolation, its end. And her other environmental writings, there are some things in this volume that have never been collected before. So, again, first of all, Silent Spring is a classic. It's a classic of American writing. So you might have a copy already, or you might hear about it when you're reading about some other nature work or environmental work and think, well, I should get that. This has that plus lots of other writing by a very good writer and is well worth the money. I think the Library of America is probably on the expensive side, but this is a volume of theirs I've been waiting for. It's a very good addition to your library. And the next one is too. The next one is unbelievable. If you get a copy from the library, or if you buy one, be prepared to lose hours of time to it. It's National Geographic. It's Birds of the Photo Ark. It's a slightly oversized picture book of high-definition photographs of birds. Not in flight, not over canyons or over marshes at sunset or anything, but against a backdrop in a photo studio. The photographer is Joel Sartore, and he did a book called The Photo Ark. His previous book was called The Photo Ark for National Geographic, which was a bunch of animals of all types being brought into this photo studio and put in front of a backdrop for extremely detailed and often just heartbreakingly revealing photo of them. And this concentrates on birds and does the same thing, and it's amazing. It's just amazing. The thoughts that you will find yourself thinking when you look into the eyes of these creatures. Something about them being slightly uncomfortable, something about them knowing that they are in an artificial environment, adds something to their, for want of a better phrase, their facial expressions. That it happened with all the animals, and it happens with all of these birds, and I can't really describe it, but you'll know it the minute you look at these pictures. So if that sort of thing appeals to you, boy oh boy, these photo arcs, this and the last one, are well worth your time. And then we'll go from the sublime to the slightly ridiculous, where we'll do one romance novel this time around, a Regency romance by Jenna Jaxon. This is, can you make that out? To Woo a Wicked Widow is the name of it. It's part of Jenna Jackson's Widows Club series, in which a whole group of wives lose their husbands in the war. It's not exactly the worst thing that could happen to them. I mean, they have all sorts of different personalities, but the loss frees them to either go back on the marriage mart or to scorn it. And either way, they're not the women they used to be. They're much more than standard wife hunters are expecting. So the fun of every book is, where will the sparks fly as each one of these war widows finds the next love of their life. And this one is no different than all the others. It's just wonderful, just wonderful. So I strongly recommend it. And then we'll finish up with two works of contemporary fiction. Both short story collections, both by masters. So, not the promising debut short story collection, and not an uneven sophomore effort, and also not a collection of short stories by someone who has stated openly in the Paris Review that they are mainly consider their work to be writing novels. Instead, these are two collections that I just thought both of them were fantastic. I can't wait to see the critical reaction that they get just everywhere, because I think they will both be reviewed everywhere. First one is American Histories by John Edgar Wideman, the great John Edgar Wideman, and it's mighty powerful. What he can do in a single paragraph, just well, it's amazed me for his whole career, and he hasn't lost a step. That's for sure. His stories are incredibly. They will cling to you. They're powerful. And then the other one is by Tom McGuane. It's Cloudbursts, and a totally different tonal register from John Edgar Wideman, and yet brilliant, and yet the same demonstration of the heart of the short story art, which is to compact a much longer work and excise and then compact some more and then excise until you have this concentrated block of plutonium. And Tom McGuane he's in my opinion, his register is slightly more towards the comic absurd than John Edgar Wideman, but they both write the kind of short stories that do not feel the way so many short stories, contemporary short stories, do. If you've ever read a contemporary short story collection, you might have had the same impression that I often do, which is that they're sort of make-weight. And these two just don't write make-weight prose. So I highly recommend them both. And I wish that, I'm sure that it does. I wish that the yoga book had the ability to allow me to then show you these things as a mosaic on one screen, so you could sort of look at them. But I guess that's what this video is for. You'll be able to. I'll annotate everything down below. But those are 10 titles for March coming out real soon, or maybe I think a couple of them have strict on sale dates for later in the month. That I very much recommend. Across what I tried to make it fairly varied in terms of types of books. but I'm sure we'll be talking about them as the month goes on. So I will wrap this up for now, and I will see you then. Thank you, BookTube.